Hello, Anne.
Thanks to Trump's deportation policy, there are people who've been shipped off to a hellhole prison in El Salvador without what they call due process. And the administration says they have no plans to bring them home. Yeah. Even the usually pro-MAGA podcaster Joe Rogan isn't on board with these tactics. Watch.
You got to get scared that people who are not criminals are getting, like, lassoed up and deported and sent to, like, El Salvador prisons.
I think a human being being plucked out of nowhere and ending up in a country he's never been in a maximum security prison with gang members, seems like a bad thing to happen to me.
It's horrific. It's horrific.
I don't think that should be controversial.
No, that's not controversial at all.
Oh. The White House press secretary has called one of these deportation mistakes a quote-unquote clerical error. Well, if it's a clerical error, then bring them back.
Right.
Is this the immigration policy people thought they were voting for?
I don't believe so. So listen, the status quo of doing nothing and allowing just limitless undocumented migration to this country was unsustainable. People voted to have the border secured, but then they wanted to primarily deal with people who were undocumented and committed crimes in this country. 80% of Americans support that. This whole table supports that. But there is a key element that is involved here. Due process. You cannot simply look at somebody and say, well, I think they're a criminal, or there may be allegations. We have a system in this country where you would put the people before a judge, they have their day in court to make their case, and on top of that, I would add, they should be returned to their country of origin, not a third-party country that they have no connection to, no relatives in a jail there. Let their home country decide if they're going to be jailed and give them that process. But sending them somewhere they've never lived is honestly horrifying. And if one person slips through the cracks, that's reason enough to pause, shut it down, and decide how you do it the right way.
It's cruel.
Yeah, cruel. The cruelty is, you just said it's cruel, Joy, and the cruelty seems to me to be the point.
Yeah.
And when you ask the question, is this what people voted for? Yeah, I do think so. I think people thought, it's not going to happen to me or mine. That's what I think. You know, it's okay for it to happen to your neighbor. It's okay to happen to that other person. But now that it's happening to American citizens, naturalized citizens, people with green cards, people that are legally here, people's sisters, brothers, sister-in-laws, now I think people are thinking, oh, but I didn't vote for that. I didn't vote for my family to be hurt. And it's a lack of empathy in this country. It is a lack of empathy.
Well, the thing is,
they could make phone calls. If the United States has an agreement with, let's say, El Salvador to house people, right? They're paying El Salvadoran prisons to pay people. Then why doesn't the White House say, I want that person back because that was a mistake? Generally, the Supreme Court has found that Congress has to act and has to sort of make this type of law. And as Alyssa mentioned, this is completely unconstitutional. The minute you get here into the United States, especially if you have legal status, the Constitution applies to you too. And so the fact that this is happening is something that every American citizen should be extremely concerned about. In particular, I think, Anna, you're probably going to mention this, but there's this, the removal of Kilmar Armando Abrego Garcia. He's a Salvadorian national who was granted protected status by an immigration judge. He was taken from an IKEA parking lot with his 5-year-old autistic son in the car with him. And he is married to an American citizen, and he is legally protected. He's a legal person here.
So what did they base this
Listen, they apparently have this point system that they use where if you have tattoos, if you're wearing a Chicago Bulls hoodie, if things like that is what they are basing it on. If you're going to be picking up people with tattoos, then Pete Hegseth should be very concerned.
Yeah.
But, you know, look,
You know who else?
I think
Madonna and Cher both have tattoos.
No, listen,
Just saying. Brian, do you have one?
No, I don't.
All right.
I'm really glad and grateful that we're talking about this because America cannot get numb to the cruelty that is going on and that is being inflicted on the Latino community specifically by the Trump administration. Look, in my view, these people, mostly men, the ones that they've sent to El Salvador are men, are props as part of Donald Trump's sick, cruel charade. He built this narrative that there was this gang that was overtaking America, and that he was going to send hardened criminals and rapists, monsters to this, out of the country, get rid of them. The problem is that finding them, identifying them, is not that easy. So then they're picking up, understand this, they are disappearing people. Some of these wives and loved ones are finding out that their husbands, that their brothers are in this jail because they happen to see a video that was put out by the government of El Salvador. Can you imagine the grief, the distress, the sadness, the anxiety of a loved one not knowing where your relative is because they've been picked up off the street while they're with the deaf, autistic 5-year-old U.S. citizen son, or because they are disappeared from an ICE appointment?
Yeah.
What kind of country is this? America, we cannot let this continue. You have got to stand up. You have got to call your congresspeople. You have got to tell them that we will not stand for this.
Only 34% of Republicans feel that it's wrong. 89% of Democrats.
Well, what? Specify what part is wrong. Because most Americans...
To give, like, the whole thing, a new YouGov poll shows 60% of Americans oppose deporting immigrants without criminal convictions to El Salvador.
60%.
60% of Americans. Only 34% of Republicans go along with that.
The one thing I would just quickly say is there is a distinction, though. Most of this country, 80% support deporting people who committed crimes that were adjudicated for and had their day in court.
Specifically
That is the difference here, though,
Right.
is some of these people did not get their day in court. We don't actually have evidence that the White House has shown that they've committed crimes or have gang affiliations.
And that's the, Alyssa, you hit on the right point.
Yeah.
The fact of the matter is, if you look at the statistics, immigrants commit far less crime than American citizens.
Yes.
Far less crimes. The number is in the single digits. So as Anna said,
And it's not only lack of due process,
don't-
it's lack of transparency. They haven't so
It's
much
the
as
transparency
released
that
the
I
names.
Because I think what Sunny was talking about, I break a little bit when you say, I think it was until it affected them. I don't think anyone thought this is how it would play out because we have a system.
oh, I definitely thought that.
I did not. I think what we're
Definitely.
seeing, it's like in the movies or another time when they mask themselves, like that is not the US to me. When they mask themselves, they come up and drag you out of your home. They were profiling young students at a football game where I had a friend of a friend whose daughter is like born and raised, all the things.
They're
and
attacking free speech.
They're profiling and they're just taking brown people
Well,
and they're rounding them up.
Exactly,
I don't
they're
think anyone
taking
thought,
brown people, which is why I thought that's exactly what they were going to do.
But the whole
How do you
thing that you're
distinguish
saying,
between
Alyssa,
us?
yeah, what they're saying is that the country does want the elimination of people who commit crimes here.
want the
want
system.
it.
A very small number.
But how would you know who they are if you don't arrest them and
Because
give
they
them
have
due process?
criminal records.
Due process. They
But
go to
these
court.
people that are
In other
reading
words,
about-
how would you know?
You don't know.
If you are sending criminals, they should have criminal records,
You
right?
give them a day in court, and they have a chance with a lawyer
then-
to defend that they're not gang affiliated, that
Right.
they did not commit a crime. The way that we determine if anyone has committed a crime in this country, and then you deport them if they have. That's what the Lake and Riley bill did,
remember
which
that-
was supported widely. in
remember that
Congress.
Trump ran
Real
on
fast.
getting rid of millions and people kept saying there are not millions
There's
of
not
violent
millions of-
criminals.
No, there's not
That-
there
and
aren't
so-
criminals.
Let me just make one
We're-
last
we're out
point.
of time.
Okay. This agreement with El Salvador was set up by Marco Rubio, a son of immigrants. Do not tell me, Marco, that you do not have the ability to call Nayib Bukele, who when you say jump says how high, and tell him that we need that man back.
Yeah.
That son, that autistic son needs his father back. And you, a Christian, are getting away with this cynicism and hypocrisy and lying. It's the lying that is just, unbelievable from the government.
I hope Marco's watching.